my lovelies. So today is October 22nd and it's Thursday. And I wanted to go over today's agenda with you guys and just kind of what the expectation is for your assignment. So today, students will write a thesis statement for the prompt, is solitary confinement an appropriate form of punishment? So the goal is you're going to have your thesis statement written for your argument essay, and you're going to start to fill out this graphic organizer. Make sure that you use your annotated bibliography to find evidence for your 3 reasons. If you don't have an annotated bibliography, then I will give you a copy of mine, but you have to send me an email and let me know, because otherwise I don't know who to send it to. So I also want to kind of go ahead and show you guys a couple of things that I have in here to help you write your paper. You go into solitary confinement and go into benchmark 2. If you look at argument essay sentence starters to begin with, I've got all these like sentence frames that you guys can use in order to help write maybe like a more sophisticated or mature argument essay. Okay, so these are argument essay sentence starters that you guys can use. As you can see, like under claim, establishing why your claim is important. The first one, I don't know if I would use in this essay, but the second one is a really good sentence frame that you could totally use. And so it's, although X, or in our situation, solitary confinement, may appear to only concern a small group of people, it should in fact concern anyone who cares about blank. It is important that we as a society blank. Views on solitary confinement range from blank to blank. So if you find yourself kind of stuck and you're like, man, I don't know how to start this paragraph, I don't know what to say next, you guys can come over here and look at some of these sentence stems and maybe get some inspiration. There's also counterclaim, what your enemy is saying. So you can say like, many people feel that, my opposition believes, I used to think that, some people believe, my opposition will tell you, my opposition will ask. So any of those work. For rebuttal, like when you're trying to explain how your counterclaim is wrong, however, blank. Several sources have proven that blank is incorrect. The vast majority of people, blank. So, and then underneath there's other just sentence starters. More importantly, another essential point, another valid concern. So those are all different options for you guys of what you can write. So the next one here is evidence-based sentence starters. So this is when you have stated one of your reasons that you believe the way you do, and you give us evidence to support your reason. So a lot of people will use just the same thing over and over again. The article said, the article said, the article said. That gets really, really boring, and it's a sign of an immature writer. So I've got several examples here that you guys can use instead. The article, book, study text stated, the article explained, the article proved. The evidence to support the claim is, according to the text, the author wrote, the author stated, the author explained, on page blank it said blank, from the reading we learned blank, from the reading we know that blank, this evidence supports the claim because blank. So you can use any of those. For this assignment, we did a lot of research and we read several articles, but we also watched a video and we listened to a podcast. So anywhere it says article, you could also put the video, the podcast. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then explaining your evidence. So you're going to cite your evidence and you explain it. So this means blank. This article, podcast, video proves blank. This explains blank. This depicts, this conveys, this implies, this suggests. Blank could be interpreted as blank. All of those are kind of options where, of course, like you would fill in the blank. So I just want you to be aware of those. When you go to write your paper, these can be very, very helpful. All right. So for today's actual assignment, we're going to click on Graphic Organizer, and you're going to see, and move my face out of the way. We're going to turn in our Graphic Organizer for the argument assignment here, and then your essay prompt. When should this use of solitary confinement be used as a punitive measure, and should there be a limit on how long a person can be sentenced to solitary confinement? I have gone ahead and shortened that prompt to just, is solitary confinement an appropriate form of discipline or an appropriate form of punishment? So I have shortened that for you. If you click this blue link, it is going to take you to a Google document that looks like this. This is going to be our graphic organizer, guys. So this is where we're going to brainstorm and put all of our thoughts in for our paper. And it's going to be really nice and organized. So that way, when it's time for us to actually write our essay, all we have to do is just pull this up and just boop, 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 go from the top to the bottom. It's going to be great. Let me explain the graphic organizer before we get started. And please remember that I'm not asking any student to get this done in one class period. So we're actually going to spend today and tomorrow working on this. So for the introduction paragraph, it's this first box here. And you're going to put an idea for your hook. What are you going to do to get the reader's attention? Background information. This is where I told you guys, most people don't have a clear picture of what solitary confinement is like. And this is where you have to paint that picture for them. This is your responsibility. So let people know what solitary looks like, what it feels like, and all that in this box. Okay, then the next box is going to be your thesis statement. And remember, the thesis statement is one sentence, and it answers the essay prompt. It's going to have a declaration plus 3 reasons. So the essay prompt was, do you think that solitary confinement is an appropriate form of punishment? And you'd give your 3 reasons. Then from there, we're going to use the rest of this box, and I'm going to kind of show you how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and file, make my own copy. I actually already did this. So here's my copy. So I've just gone ahead and I've put in what my thesis statement is. That's what I want everybody to start on with their essay, because it's going to make a roadmap for you in what you're going to talk about for the rest of your for your paper. So for me, my answer was solitary confinement is an inappropriate form of punishment because it causes physical harm, is detrimental to mental health, and it is an ineffective form of rehabilitation. You can use the same thesis statement that I did if you want, or you can write your own. You can kind of reword it. You can pick different reasons to support your declaration. It's completely up to you. So I think this may not work very well because it's a tiny screen. But here on the board, I created a sentence sim for you. Solitary confinement is or is not an appropriate form of punishment because 1, 2, and 3. And then over here, as a class, we all came up with several different reasons why we thought it was or was not appropriate. And so you can pick your own reasons. You do not have to pick the same thing that I did. It's completely up to you guys and what you want to write. Make sure that whatever reasons you pick, though, you can find a couple of pieces of evidence to support them. So I've got my thesis statement here. And then based off of my thesis statement, I can start to fill out the other boxes in my graphic organizer. So you'll see right here, reason 1, and I pulled this straight from my thesis statement, physically harmful, right? So you can go ahead and write a complete sentence here, or you can just put in notes. Like I could have started by saying, many people don't think about how physically harmful solitary confinement can be for a person. That could be my first sentence, right? So yeah, then here you would put evidence that supports your claim. So this is where you put examples of quotes, statistics, whatever. What I'm going to do to find my proof is I'm going to come up to my annotated bibliography that I wrote. And then you can just kind of scroll through your annotated bibliography, look at your pieces of evidence. What did you find that helps support the idea that being in solitary confinement actually has physical negative effects? So I wanted to find this really quickly and not read the whole thing. So I'm going to go Control F. And I remember that heart palpitations were one of the problems. Right there, heart palpitations. And this is Stromberg, The Science of Solitary Confinement. So it was the first article that we read. So right here, the quote is a majority of those surveyed experience symptoms such as dizziness, heart palpitations, chronic depression, while 41% blah, 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 blah. I only want to focus, though, on the physical ailments that happen whenever you're in solitary confinement. So I remember from the article, this is where they did a survey of 500 inmates in solitary confinement, and they found that, again, a majority of them suffered from this. So I'm going to come back to my lovely graphic organizer. And I actually have already like done this, so I'm just gonna pop it up so you can kind of see. I did make sure that I put Stromberg's name right next to it because I need to make sure that even if it's not in quotation marks, that I cite this correctly whenever I write my paper. So I did go ahead and summarize it in my own words. A study of 500 solitary confinement inmates found that a large amount suffered from dizziness and heart palpitations. And just because I wanted to show Hayden what in-text citations look like, I went ahead and cited it correctly right there. So another physical thing that happened to people who were in solitary confinement was, if you guys remember, Richard King ended up suffering from like problems with his eyesight. There we go. So in this bullet, I see that Robert King spent 29 years in solitary confinement, and it says his eyesight also deteriorated to the point where he was nearly blind. Though this has gradually improved since he was released. So that's great. I'm glad that it has improved. For my article, I want to focus on the fact that, like, because he spent so much time in a small area, it has really, really messed with his eyesight. So again, I went ahead and I summarized it in my own words. But even though I've summarized it, guys, when I go to write this in my paper, I still have to cite where I found this information out because I didn't know about Richard King all by myself, right? I had to learn about it. So yeah, if I were going to put this in my paper, it would just say Richard King was in solitary confinement for almost 30 years. He is now nearly blind because of the damage done to his optical muscles. And then I've got Stromberg right there. So it is very important to make sure that you note somewhere in this where you got your quotes from, because if I accidentally cited this as Stoffers or Cannon, those are different authors from different pieces. And so I would actually be citing my stuff incorrectly, and that could be counted as academic dishonesty, which would get you a 0, and nobody wants that. Okay. What we would later do is I would reflect on this. How or why does my proof, do these two like pieces of evidence, support my claim that it's physically harmful? And then conclusion, explain the significance of this reason. Answer the question, so what? Why should someone care that a person in prison is suffering physical harm? Because they're a criminal, right? They shouldn't have broken the law if they didn't want to go to prison. So that's your job, is you have to make your reader care. Really quick, I don't agree with the statement that I just made earlier, the whole like, why should we care? I think we should care and we should have compassion for everyone. But it's your job as the writer to explain to me why I should care. So reason 2, I'm going to get that straight from my thesis statement, mental health. It's detrimental to mental health. So I'm going to plug in mental health right here. Under here, I would put, again, my evidence. Now, there was a lot of stuff about mental health and the effects that solitary confinement has on increased depression, suicidal ideation, hallucinations, all kinds of things like that. So you guys go through and you find the evidence that you think most strongly supports your claim that solitary confinement is bad because it's harmful to somebody's mental health. Then how, why, and so what? Okay, this is where it gets really, really weird. On reason 3, that's where I'm going to actually have you guys introduce your counterclaim. So if you look, my reason 3 is that solitary confinement is an ineffective form of rehabilitation. The concept of rehabilitation is that if somebody goes to prison and I offer them rehabilitation, that when they get out of prison, they're going to be able to be more successful in the real world. They'll be able to maintain a job. They'll be able to maintain relationships and conversations, right? So that's kind of the idea, is that we know that this is not a good form of rehabilitation. So here, I'm going to start with my counterclaim, and this is what my opposition thinks. So if I think it's a good form of rehabilitation, or if I think it's not a good form of rehabilitation, they're going to think it is, or they're not going to care if the person gets rehabilitated. So for my counterclaim, I wrote, many people feel like the only way to stop crime is to have incredibly harsh penalties. And we found that out in Juvenile Justice by Carl Stoffers. And this was actually William G. Otis and Tom Cotton both had comments that were very similar to this. So that's where I got my evidence from. My rebuttal, why I think my opposition is wrong, is, however, this is an incorrect philosophy. Solitary confinement is one of the harshest penalties available in the United States, and numerous studies have shown that it's an ineffective form of rehabilitation. Okay, so I've got my reason, like my third reason from my essay or from my thesis statement right here, is that it's an ineffective form of rehabilitation, right? But I also introduced like my counterclaim. I go ahead and acknowledge the fact that there is an opposition. They do feel differently than I feel. I've had a couple of students that focused on mental health for their third reason, or they focused on increased numbers of suicide out of people who spend time in solitary confinement. And so my suggestion to them was this first sentence up here would be, my opposition would ask, why should we care if a criminal in prison commits suicide? Or why should we care if a felon in prison is suffering from depression? So I've told them like that would be a really good like first sentence there as their counterclaim. And then in your rebuttal, you would explain why you think they're incorrect. And then again, I'm going to have evidence here. I'm going to go back to my annotated bibliography. For mine, I'm going to sit there and focus on the situations where people were offered opportunities for rehabilitation and they turned their lives around and became successful. I'm also going to talk about the guys in Ear Hustle and how they haven't been released into the public yet, but they did go from being in the SHU for decades to going to the general population in San Quentin, and how they can't cope and how they struggle to maintain conversations. They struggle with social anxiety. They can't be around other people. That lets you know that if we let them out and loose today on the streets, they wouldn't be able to manage. They wouldn't be able to cope. Then again, your reflection, the how or why. And for the conclusion of this, you would explain the significance. You would explain like, so what? Why should we care? This is going to be your last paragraph. It's your conclusion paragraph. And in here, you're going to re-emphasize your position. You're going to discuss the implications. So what could happen if the world sided with you? What would happen if somebody read Jaden or Jasmine's or Ileana's essay and they were like, man, this kid has some really good points, right? And then the very last thing that you're going to do is the call to action. The call to action is that last statement of this essay where you ask people that if they agree with you, that they stand up and do something about it. You ask them to research politicians before they go vote and make sure the politicians have similar views as they do when it comes to criminal justice. So that's what your graphic organizer is going to look like. And that's how it connects to your essay. And it also connects to that annotated bibliography. Like I said, it's not due today, which is Thursday, but it will be due tomorrow on Friday. So just kind of be aware of that. Most of my students today were able to finish their thesis statement. They filled out the claim for each one of the boxes. And for the third one, they filled out the counterclaim and rebuttal. And then several of my students were able to get some, if not a good chunk of their evidence into their graphic organizer. So that's kind of where you should be by the end of today. And then tomorrow you would fill out the rest. If you guys have any questions, concerns, whatever, please send me an email, contact me in some way, shape, or form. I really hope to see you guys soon, or at least hear from you. Good luck with everything. Bye.